Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here. Today we're going to be visiting one of the coolest museums in Utah. This is the Edge of the Cedars Museum. It's a state park. And it's really a beautiful place, and it's an amazing collection of artifacts dating back from 10,000 years ago all the way to historic times. Outside the front, there's all these representations of petroglyphs that are also seen around this area. But we're going to go in and we're going to see some amazing connections. Some of these artifacts connect this region all the way down to central Mexico and Guatemala. So we're going to have a good old time, and I hope you enjoy this. So first, coming in here, there's a lot of really neat displays just with some photography, really capturing the area. The desert is such a beautiful landscape, but I'm here to see artifacts. So we're going to zip on through this area. This is a recreation of a panel that I have not yet visited that may date back all the way to the Ice Age. And it's a bit of a hike to get into, but I'm hoping to be able to go to it this year. In this case, we can see displays of projectile points that date back from 12,000 years ago, which is during the Ice Age. So these are Clovis points going all the way down to about 200 AD. And I really love that there's a display highlighting the most important weapon in human history, the weapon that put humans at the top of the food chain, and that is the atlatl. So there is an atlatl up on top. The atlatl came before bows and arrows. And it launches a dart, which is like an arrow on steroids, like a 6-foot-long arrow. But some of these darts had a removable foreshaft. We actually have examples here of a removable foreshaft. We know this was the case, but it's rare to find these preserved. So this is really exciting. This museum really does have some of the best examples, things that you read about in books, and it's like literally got them all. So for example, take a look at this. This is a throwing stick. Basically, this is a boomerang that was used to hunt things like rabbits. There's a snare that was used for catching rabbits in a net. And there's a scissor snare. These are very rare. You can see the cordage in the middle. This is also used to catch rabbits. Instead of hunting, you let the snare do the work for you when you're not around. There's a lot of other things here. We hear about how important salt was. And here is a piece of leather with salt wrapped up in it for storage. Got a jar with squash seeds inside. The squash seeds are still there and preserved. And a mano metate for grinding food. It's amazing. Okay, if you're new to my channel, you might not know this. I'm a flint knapper, so I make stone tools and stone weapons. So I'm well versed in this. And so I have a different kind of appreciation for how some of this stuff is used in sword. And this is incredible. Check this out. Okay, you've got all these projectile points. But look at this. It's a conveyor belt. This is unreal. You've got each arrowhead roped in, and so you just cut one off, then you cut another one off, cut another one off. So this is a way to store them safely. I've never seen this anywhere else. It makes utter and complete sense, but it's just so fascinating to see just the basics of day-to-day life here in this museum. These are ceramic effigies and also stone effigies that have different meaning. You can see this one is a bird. This one looks like a foot. And this is like a bird head. And you look at the ceramics down here. This ceramic has like a lizard holding on to it. And it looks just like a lizard I saw yesterday while I was out exploring some ruins. You have faces, which gives you an idea of how did people potentially see themselves. And here's another ceramic that, again, the handle has some sort of an animal. I don't know what that is. It got a short tail, but looks more like a coyote to me. But look, there's a little tiny turquoise inlay on the eye. Just tiny little details that are so beautiful. We're going to see a lot of different ceramics, but I want you to understand, as beautiful as they are, sometimes there's extreme function, and I'm going to show you what I mean by this. So you look at these pots. Some of these, and look at these. These are a little better example. Okay, you see these divots, these little grooves. They're called corrugated. This is a corrugated pot. Corrugations give a greater surface area to the pot, which means that it will heat up much faster. So anytime we're looking around, if you see a pot that has these grooves, this is like a Native American microwave. I love these mugs. This is black on white pottery. And here is a sandal woven out of a plant called a yucca plant. It's a very sturdy plant. The best one in the area is called a banana yucca. You can make sandals that'll last you quite a while. All dogs, all domestic dogs, were domesticated from wolves. And that being said, Native Americans had their own breeds of dogs. And those are something that were used as a draft animal. Before horses, they would help to haul things and carry things. They were good for protection and they helped in hunting. But one thing we don't think about is the fiber. If you look at these, this is rope that was woven out of dog hair. And you can see in this, it was woven into like a sash or a belt. And you look at the elaborate weaving. And again, nothing goes to waste. There's also a couple of effigies of dogs. It's wild to think. When we think about a dog, its hair shedding and how it's shedding everywhere. It's weird to think of dog fur, dog hair, as being a resource, something you would want. These are some exceptionally beautiful pieces. The patterning and the coloration. A lot of times pottery is more of what we would call a Zentangle style. But occasionally, you'll have figurative depiction. This is rare, but take a look at this. There's a bird, and over here there's also, looks like a man with a bow and arrow. It's pretty rare. You don't normally see this. The Mimbres area normally has a lot of this, but normally it's more of the Zentangle style and not figurative depiction. These are hammer stones, and if you're used to popular culture, you might mistakenly call something like this a tomahawk, but it's not. These were used for cutting wood and adjusting things. This is a lone macaw feather. We're going to talk more about macaws here in a few minutes. But macaws were very sacred to the people of this area, but they didn't live here. They were imported from they were imported from south, from Mexico and Central America. We will talk more about these in a few minutes. But look at all these other small little pendants and amulets you've got. Turquoise, shell, bone, a stone ring, beads made out of bone, beads made out of shell. There's a tiny little shell. All of these add up and make a necklace. This is, these are more yucca fiber sandals. Some of them are very loose. That almost looks like juniper bark, but it is yucca. You look how loose the weave is there and how insanely tight the weave is there. But it's a good way to get around in the heat. It's something I still do today. Weaving was an ancient art, and in this area, it was something that was very common. But these artifacts you see down below, these are what's left of the Bullet Canyon loom. And you can see this image of a weaver using a loom. So it's very common to have an appreciation for the ancient rugs and blankets that were woven. They're very commonly collected still today, but we don't normally see the original artifacts that were used to weave them. This is another thing I've never seen in another museum. This is a blunt tip. It's removable. You can see it's It's got a cord. This is a blunt tip for an atlatl dart. So just like with blunt tipped arrows, you can use this to throw at some smaller game like a rabbit, where it's not going to totally destroy the meat and you're just going to thump them, and that's enough to either stun them or kill them. But you can see it's tied on with cordage, and it's a blunt tip made out of the end of a femur. Baskets were usually woven out of willow, and because it has concentric patterning, it makes it very easy to start to do these sort of geometric patterns that you see. And this is the birth of where you get your southwestern style, kind of that zigzag southwestern style. It starts with baskets, because you can't just do straight lines. It's all zigzag. This room is a repository. It's kind of visual storage with a lot of pieces that have been found in the area. Interestingly, also in this area, if a piece is stolen illegally and recovered by the government, it's brought here and displayed here. And so it gives you a chance to see some of these things. But here on this edge, this is really interesting. This is a ladder. And the ladder itself looks like it's made out of pieces of juniper, but it's lashed with willow. And it's a very interesting style. It's a very different technique. We normally depict, let me take a look. We're going to go in here in a second, but this is how you normally see things. It's just kind of nailed on. But actually, there's easier ways to make a ladder. And just willow, fresh cut willow, you can see can just be used almost like rope, and then it'll dry nice and hard. But that is how you make something like that. I wish there's a way to have all of these on closer display, but still, it's nice that we can at least see them to some degree. There's a gourd, and you look at some of these pieces. Think about the math it takes to be able to produce something like that. My favorite colors, schemes, I love this red pottery. This, to me, it really does it, and it seems very, very reminiscent of Mayan pottery. This is the same kind of red ochre I love to use. But down below, look at these bowls as well. Just a bunch of polka dots. A little bit of a range of everything. Behind me here is one of the most exciting pieces. What we're looking at is basically a sash, but it's made out of macaw feathers. This was found here locally. This is central Utah. There's no macaws here, but it turns out macaws were very sacred. There was trade going back and forth, trade of ideas, trade of religious beliefs, trade of artwork styles, trade of goods like copper and cacao beans and feathers and even live parrots, back and forth from this region all the way down to central Mexico and even Guatemala. And macaws, bright, beautiful birds, but they're magical. They can talk. They can learn your language. Think of the impact that would actually have. Imagine that. If you have a bird and it speaks your language and it learns your words, think of the spiritual impact that would have. It would be pretty impressive. And among many ancient cultures, the color red was very sacred. We do see scarlet macaws in many motifs and many pieces of art here locally. Now, these feathers, again, were brought, up from north. But we have found live macaws, well, the skeletons of live macaws that were kept at places like Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. We know these were shipped up from down south. In fact, just about 60 miles into the border of Mexico, there was an ancient city called Paquime. Sometimes it's also called Casas Grandes, which is not the same thing as Casa Grande, two different sites. Casas Grandes or Paquime was huge. It was a hub. People came from the north and the south from all over, and it was a trade hub. They found these giant rooms filled floor to ceiling with shells. Here's a bunch of curly shells. Here's a bunch of straight shells. Here's a bunch of bones. Here's a bunch of turquoise. And they traded back and forth. There were pens where they kept and bred turkeys. So turkeys are good for, first of all, live turkeys. You want to buy a turkey and take it up north, raise it, have it raise young. It's good. You have turkey eggs. You have turkey feathers. They're a feather factory. You can use feathers to make robes. You can use feathers to weave rope. And you can use feathers for decoration and to fletch arrows and to fletch atlatl darts. So feathers are really good. But live macaws, there were live macaws kept at Pakime, and they were shipped up north, as far north as here. We occasionally find them. They're rare, but they're very special. And so, of course, feathers are made out of keratin. It's the same material as hair. It doesn't preserve well. So we're lucky that this beautiful sash lasted. And again, it gives us a clue. We're going to look at some more artifacts in a second and see some more links to Mesoamerica. Take a look at this. We're going to see something really cool. We're going to see a copper bell. And you might not find that particularly exciting. However, that's pretty advanced technology and metallurgy to make copper bells. Copper bells were brought up from Mexico. They were a highly prized trade item. You know, they would have been very shiny in real life, and that's a very magical sound. It's really, really cool. Now, I like over here, they do have a display that goes into a little bit about the trade of the region, and this makes me really happy to see. Look, they're spotlighting, you know, macaws, spotlighting copper bells, jadeite, different things like that. But let me tell you why this is important. In Native American cultures, there's a lot of suppression and ancient suppression. And there was in the early 1900s this idea by archaeologists, we got to keep the idea of Native Americans small and local. Everything they did was small and local. When in truth, these were highly advanced civilizations with advanced trade networks and very well connected. And that was suppressed intentionally. Maybe I'll do a whole video on the specifics of why that was. But it was actually as a way to try to promote tourism after World War I. You had a bunch of soldiers that were shell-shocked. And New Mexico specifically tried to do, well, hey, you know, let's have this idea of these Zen prayer farmers in the desert. You know, let's come to New Mexico, come see the ruins, and just kind of be at peace after you've survived. I said World War II, I think, World War I, except for World War I. But in truth, these were their own people, and these ancient people had advanced cultures and advanced trade. So it really makes me happy to see that showing what we do know about how advanced and how far-reaching this trade actually was. I'm going to take a look at what is normally called like a keyhole mug. These things are really important, and they're often misunderstood. So if you look in the handle, you see it almost looks like a keyhole opening there, right? Or if you look at this one over here, you can see that, how that works. Let's talk about this. We're going to talk a little bit more about these keyhole mugs. So there's all different kinds of mugs, all different beautiful shapes and patterns. And again, these are usually decorated with just black on white and usually Zentangle patterns, some sort of geometric shapes. It's very common among the American West and among Mexico. Well, there's more to it. People just say, oh, it kind of looks like a keyhole, but you got to understand the bigger picture. Throughout the American West, and the Southwest and Northwestern Mexico, you will find many doorways that have this keyhole shape. Now, when I was a kid, like rangers at, places like Mesa Verde would be like, oh yeah, that's it. Just kind of shooting from their hip and making stuff up. And they're like, that's so if you're carrying in a big bundle of firewood over your shoulders, you can go in the doorway and that it's okay. It's not what it was for. These T-shaped doors have deep, deep spiritual significance of some kind, some sort of cultural affiliation, some sort of spiritual meaning. And if you question that, let me explain. We kind of see them start in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, and then it starts to radiate out and eventually makes it all the way down to Pakime in Mexico, where almost every door in Pakime is this T-shaped door. Now also, you could just say, it's a door, it's a style, right? It's kind of like having a walkway or something. But in Pakime, they found 2 stone altars that were they're about the size of a box fan, about this big, and they have the T door chiseled out. These are with people with technology at the time were not using iron to chisel stone. When you see these amazing Pueblos, these are made out of soft sandstone. But these altars were made out of like a quartzite, and they had a doorway, and they had altar offerings on top. So it would seem that the T-door aperture means something much more. Maybe it's a gateway to something, maybe to somewhere or from somewhere. We don't know, but we know it's more than just a door to carry in firewood through. It's enough that the symbol itself of the T aperture was an altar itself in Pakime. So knowing that, anytime you see one of these, again, most of these mugs do not have the keyhole or the T aperture, but some of them do. So is that a significant thing? Certainly. Is it show status? Does it show some sort of religious affiliation? We don't know, but we know that it means something more than just being dismissive as a decorative thing, or it's just a doorway to get firewood through. So anytime you're ever looking at pottery, if you see the T aperture, the keyhole, you're looking at something special. Well, I'm out here in the middle of a snowstorm, and we're gonna go inside of that Pueblo. We're gonna go enter a kiva. But seeing it snowing out here, we're in a Red Rock Desert, and most everybody just associates the heat of the summer with the Red Rock Desert of the Southwest. But as you can see with it snowing right here, it gets cold too, and it snows. I'm out here in my shorts, but that's okay, because we're gonna go inside. Now we're gonna take a look at a kiva. Now, if you watch my videos, there's a lot of kivas at sites of ancient ruins here in the Southwest, and most of them are not intact. They're a big circular pit with little pillars around the edge, and that's kind of hard to interpret. This is a small kiva that we can actually go inside and get a sense of what it's like to be in. Now, we know these were sacred spaces, so we want to be respectful while we enter them. But the idea of the kiva got bigger and bigger. And if you want to see, if you go to Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, you can see enormous kivas that are not intact. They're just the walls, and you can see how big they were. And some of these kivas could hold hundreds of people. Some of these kivas were even multiple stories on one particular site in Chaco Canyon. Well, the Chacoan people ended up also starting what is called Aztec ruins. Aztec ruins have nothing to do with the Aztec people. Ancient European settlers finding the ruins thought they were Aztecs, so they named the whole town Aztec, New Mexico. But if you go to Aztec, you can go inside a great kiva that still exists and is intact. Great kivas are different. You don't climb down into them. You have to walk down steps. They're that big. But again, going in a great kiva, there's a sense of a sacred space. It's a beautiful feeling, but it all starts with a little kiva like this. So we're gonna go ahead and enter this kiva. I'm gonna do some LiDAR scans as well to try to give you a sense of what it's like. So this Pueblo was a pretty standard size Pueblo. Normally you have 8 to 12 rooms and kiva, but some of these can get bigger and bigger. So great house communities like this would have had rooms, and each room would have had a roof, but you would have at least one kiva. From this You can see this hole. This is ventilation. This sucks in air when you have a fire going in. And if you look over here, these rooms, you can't access them, but these are still intact. And you can see entries over there. But we're gonna go inside the kiva. I have this lens as fish-eyed as possible so that you can get a feel of what it's like to be in here. Now, normally, you would have a fire right here. It can't be too big, or else it's going to light your ladder on fire. But you have fresh air coming in from here, and there's a vent on the outside that comes down here. You would have either one stone or several rocks right here blocking the air coming in so that it doesn't put out your fire or blow coals around. I've never been in a kiva during a snowstorm before. Normally when I'm at these sorts of locations where there's an intact kiva, it's usually summer and it's very hot. When you get down in the kiva, it's nice and cool. Right now I'm experiencing the opposite in that it's snowing outside. You can see the snow coming in, but it's much, much warmer in here than it is outside. So the nice thing about an underground dwelling of any kind, whether it's a dwelling to stay in or whether it's a dwelling to have for spiritual reasons, is you have a pretty neutral temperature. And one thing, when you're looking around this kiva, you can see these kind of pillars around the edges. And each of these holds the structure up. There's layers and layers and layers of logs that build up until you have the ceiling. A lot of times people misunderstand these when they're looking at a kiva that doesn't have a roof. When you look at those kind of situations, it's easy to see how that could be misunderstood. But the inside of the kiva itself usually is plastered. There's stone masonry underneath, and then it is plastered on the outside with adobe. And that gives it a nice uniform appearance. Usually these are undecorated. Some of them are occasionally decorated, and there's at one place called Pottery Mound, where the ruins there have decadent, vibrant, insane paintings on them of people and structures and birds and people holding macaws. So again, even though people could use the same sort of thing, you have to understand it from the perspective that every person is an individual, every family is an individual family, every neighborhood, every state, every city, right, in today's world. You can't always make an assumption. For example, let's say you see a Christian driving a minivan and you see a Buddhist driving a minivan. They're both driving a minivan. So certain ideas can spread throughout neighboring cultures and be used in their own ways. Unfortunately, we do not have a concise written language from the people of this time period, so we don't know exactly. But we do have their descendants today, and even though ideas shift and change over time, they can give us a great insight into how these sacred spaces were used. Being down in a kiva very much feels like you're leaving the world. And even though this is an ancient culture, you can still get a sense of what it's like. You can experience a sense of awe going into a sacred space, even if it is not a space of your people. I'm not Catholic, but every time I go into a cathedral to visit, see the stained glass, the outside world suddenly disappears, and I'm in darkness, and there's light up above, shining through these stained glass windows, and you can still feel that sense of awe. Coming down here, to me, almost feels like going into the underworld. I'm putting out the outside world and coming down in. That's my personal experience. It's not necessarily what the people who built this kiva experienced, but it is interesting to still feel a sense of awe and wonder going into this sacred space thousands of years later. Well, I hope you enjoyed coming out here and visiting the Edge of the Cedars Museum. It's an incredible place, and I highly recommend you visit. Hope you enjoyed coming down and seeing what it's like inside of a kiva. If you haven't already, if you could subscribe to my channel, I very much appreciate it. And always remember, life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.